Thank you. A POI through chat, please. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. There are 4 broad areas that OG will introduce to the debate. Number 1, accessibility, in which can be introduced by TikTok to the music industry because the way algorithm in TikTok is being constructed. Number 2, a more certain return of investment for cash-strapped artists. Number 3, increasing cross-genre introduction that increase participation to music industries. Number 4 is preventing oligopoly in the music industry that exploits artists. So the first one about accessibility with specific TikTok algorithm. What's the problem in Salus right now? What's the problem with the conventional production of music as an art form within this industry? I think it's inaccessible to a lot of artists due to 5 reasons. Number 1, you need to have strong networking with the higher ups, with the shareholders of these giant media companies that allows for the rise of only nepotism baby. Number 2, it is a system that oftentimes only give more profit to the established artists with a lot of fan bases. So there is huge, ever increasing discrepancy there. Number 3, even if you have the opportunity to rise as the rising star, the way that you can get more market basis is always hit or miss. For example, Britney Spears managed to break through as a rising artist because of her sexy voice, but a lot of artists is having modified persona that doesn't really work. For example, let's just look into Indonesian boy band and girl band XO9, Dragon Boys that are unable to reach the market with their longevity because it just doesn't work that way. So it's always hit or miss. Number 4, you need to have physical presence, if not physical copy or physical CDs, but at least you need to have like opening acts for a more established artists. So this is why 1D can get more popularity because of they're becoming the opening acts of Big Time Rush. 5SOS managed to become very big because of they're becoming the opening act for 1D. And it cannot be accessible to a lot of artists because how opening acts are very limited. Number 5, even if you have like online presence, like in Spotify, oftentimes you need to have huge advertisement to be on the page, introductory page in the Spotify itself. This 5 reasons makes arts becoming inaccessible for the new art to come in, and also limits the innovation and the how do we solve it in our side of the to new audiences. So you don't need to have strong networking in order to become successful and get your voice becoming used over and over in every single TikTok videos. Number 2, you don't need to like use specific persona that can often hit, can oftentimes miss as well, because there is already specific formula on how to get to become popular in TikTok, right? You need to have like specific RPM, a very catchy beats, only like short duration of music, and it allows you to become popular. So I think opposition is going to say, yeah, but you're going to limit creative artistic expression because you try to singularize everything into this short catchy pop song. I think that is not a problem because number 1, we're talking about like pop music artists. If they want to stay indie and don't want to become mainstream, we already have the platform. They can go to SoundCloud, they can go to Pandora. We're talking about specific artists that really want to make money out of this. But number 2, to possibly preempt this, it doesn't mean that your entire originality will be sacrificed just because you go to TikTok, because you can make your song becomes very catchy, you get to become popular, and in the future, you can show your own creativity. This is why like a lot of TikTok rising stars, artists get like 10 songs in their albums, 5 to pander to TikTok, 5 to their original fan bases. So it's not like mutually exclusive between creativity and this popularity. And yeah, I think it also means that you don't need to have like spend a lot of resources on advertisement, spend a lot of resources to try to lobby with this giant media company to make you do some favor. So I think that's already benefit for accessibility. So the second argument is about more certain return of investment for cash-strapped artists. And I think the vast majority of artists right now have been very struggling because they are being stigmatized by society. They are unable to go to Juilliard, a very fancy schools of music because of the financial barrier that they have, but they still want to make money. They still have passion in this music industry. The way we can make them and share their resources are not going to be wasted away is by giving them the specific formula that I mentioned earlier about RPM, catchy pop songs, short duration, manage to repeat it over and over again and contextual with the romance or specific needs of the people. So that is a benefit in our side of the house. So their money will not be wasted away. They can do a lot of experiments in a lot of music projects if one music project will take less resources by this algorithm in our side of the house. Before I go to my third and fourth argument, CO, yes, I take your POI.
At best, this argument caters to individual musicians. Surely it doesn't tackle to the majority of music industry, not to mention all the externalities. This is unclear what is the most significant benefit that golf can play.
Yeah, I think this is the most significant benefit, because if you want to talk about like customer bases, oftentimes they just follow what is being provided to them. And if we talk about indie music fan bases, they still get their own platform. We're just talking about majority of music artists that want to get money, that want to get recognized by the public, and majority of just TikTok users that want to feel happy and just release a lot of like exhaustion in their life by listening into catchy music. So that's a benefit of happiness utility in the side of opening government. The third argument that I'm going to explain is about cross-genre introduction. So TikTok algorithm is mostly going to be like 80% specifically targeted and curated to your needs. So if you are rock fans, then you are going to be introduced with 80% of rock type of music. But the other 20% is TikTok trying to introduce you with different genres, because that's how they can penetrate the stock market, and that's how TikTok can get profit. And by this analysis of algorithm composition, it means that now a lot of rock fan bases are going to be introduced with pop or even dangdut, and sometimes they like it, sometimes they don't. In the event that they like it and they have this cross-genre attraction, it increase more participation in that music industry, increase more demand, increase more profit to the media companies and for the individual artists. So that's more benefit in our side of the house. The fourth argument is about breaking the oligopolistic structure that exploit artists. It happens because now the media companies can take for granted underpaying the artists or trying to make sure that the artists don't get to become orbited as soon as possible, because they know that there is no other way to go. At the point in which they know that TikTok is where these artists can go indie and can go independently, so it will increase more motivation of these media companies to treat their workers better, because they know that they can leave at any moment and can become successful. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your speech. To engage, please welcome leader opposition.
Cek sama Debu.
Yes, you're audible.
Okay, if you want to POI, just type in the chat box. I will prioritize cross batch to closing government. Don't have gender preferred pronouns. I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Several important setup in opening opposition just to make this debate clear. 1. Under OO, we regret the rising trend of TikTok's strong influence towards the music industry. It means 3 things in opening opposition. 1. We prefer the counterfactual of past music industry where it still revolve and distribute around mainstream digital platform of streaming services that focus on music only, such as Spotify or Apple Music. But yeah, okay, we also have another platform such as SoundCloud. We're gonna prove that in my argument why this is better comparative. But second, we regret the current trend of people using or spread others' musician music or even their own music towards TikTok content video by saying that at best the benefit that Zuzu want to offer in his 7-minute speech is not going to be sustainable. But lastly, we oppose strong influences of TikTok to determine and dictate the trend of certain genre or even specific title of song. We're gonna engage and flip their benefit about creativity. as to why they can just suddenly run out from this burden. One big argument in my speech directly all rebuttal intertwined directly clashing with opening government. Why TikTok is the best platform to spread your music. I think before jump to my analysis, we need to recontextualize what kind of viewers and genre that most of the times they demand and listen to as an audience to this musician. We're talking about, I don't know, si kok bagi dua or ojo dibandingke. The genre most of the times is really mainstream and overgeneralized. This is most likely the scenario, and this is really bad because of three reasons. One, the reasons why people using the music background is not to enjoy the music per se. That's why a lot of people not even remember and know the full lyrics and song, but instead only small part of the song. It means even if sure at best the benefit of opening government about exposure is fly, all want to argue and questioning about the sustainability of the benefit, because I don't think, like the significance of opening government benefit is there when the only benefit that you get is exposure, but not necessarily tangible benefit such as money. At best, it means zero sum game in their side of the house, because the trend keep changing at the quick pace. At least, even though Mbak Lia want to say that this is symmetrical in both sides, at least when you get trend in the Spotify or Apple Music, you still get royalty in your small bit type of trend when your music become trending, unlike in TikTok. But second, most of the time, the genre is really limited, because when the music mostly used is dance and koplo, for example, because the reason as to why people use TikTok in the very first place is not because they are addicted to music, it's not because they genuinely follow music, but it's because they want to doing some shit about video and content creator, joget, something like that. It means the representation of genre is really shallow and narrow. The problem is indie musicians that opening government and maybe closing government want to protect is not only produce genre that considerably danceable, but we're also talking about the Adams, for example. We're talking about Mocha, that being the music of Ngabers like Reinhardt, for example, that not catered by the genre that most of the audience of the TikTok access, for example. So at best, the benefit of opening government flight, this is only catered marginal community of indie artists that even with or without the existence of this, TikTok video, this content creator already have their own platform. But thirdly, the algorithm of TikTok is really different from mainstream digital streaming platform, because the way they promote and show you new thing is not to show discovery of new song and back song, but the video. So that is why even if you like Siko Bagi Duo, TikTok not gonna show you another song who's similar to Siko Bagi Duo, but instead show the same song with different video, because the purpose of people to watch TikTok is not to hear music, but to watch video. So at best, you can have same genre that they trend in the TikTok. At best, TikTok not gonna show it, because the one that want to listen to music, people that want to listen to the audience that want to listen to music only want to hear Siko Bagi Duo. But before that, yeah, sure, close the government.
Yeah, people jump into and listening to Siko Bagi Dua different from how you get the audience, since it's a stupid song.
Okay. I'm gonna talking about the comparative as to why that trend is not exclusive, but why even if trend is important, this is better under the side of the house. What is the comparative then? I think status quo alternative before the rising trend of TikTok is better because of 4 reasons. One, monetization of the song is more transparent and clear. This is the burden that government bench need to answer, because the exclusivity of traditional streaming platforms such as Spotify or Apple Music, you get contract before input your song in the platform. How much you get royalty and in what frequency you will get it. For example, in each for 10 people stream your song, you will get money, for example 100 rupiah, for example. The problem with TikTok is they never give royalty to every stream and video that use the songs, so the only thing you get is exposure without necessarily get tangible benefit. So, but second, even if government can say that second layer, alternative like that still exists in government, such as Spotify or Apple Music, but the prerequisite of people to want to go to Spotify to hear your music is by TikTok. Sadly, this motion clearly states that this is celebrate the rising trend of TikTok's strong influence. So this is also at the cost of exposure of Spotify and Apple Music become richer significantly. So this musician have no option, because the audience also only use TikTok due to the over glorifying in their side of the house. So Zuzu can say that, SoundCloud still exists in their side, Spotify still exists, sure still exists, but If you want to still say that the people gonna use Spotify anyway after watching TikTok, it means your benefit about strong influence not gonna be significant anyway in the rest of the house. But thirdly, I think that the exclusivity of Spotify and like SoundCloud and whatever the traditional mainstream platform is the algorithm of traditional mainstream is better because the way they use algorithm is to make sure all musicians rising and they get profit, because this is the reason they get accountability and maintain image as streaming platform, because this is their only source of income, unlike TikTok that still can relying their income on another audience in another field such as politics or content creator. That is why for you playlist only access in Spotify and they renew every week based on your taste. It means all distribution talking about audience, another indie music that have same genre but not have exposure, access in opening a position, because this has become the inherent nature of traditional streaming platform to give equal distribution exposure, because they want to cater to as much musician as possible to make sure that their library is become the most, the most complete library of song, so they can compete with another streaming music such as Apple Music or Apple Music and Deezer. But lastly, even if you really want accessibility and creativity, alternative like SoundCloud exists. Why this is better? Because when we talk about audience in SoundCloud that only use SoundCloud for the sake of music and creativity, they're most of the time more loyal and genuine followers that want to really hear your music, for example, give criticism, for example, really want to know which one that make this music, for example, so they want to religiously follow this genre or music. So even if our number is small, at least our audience and followers become more sustainable comparatively in your set of the house. At best, this is only for 1 or 2 months. That is why this is not sustainable profit. Proud to open the debate.
Okay, thank you for your speech. To engage with the case, please welcome the Deputy Prime Minister.
Hi, if anyone want to POI, just use the chat box or the raise hand feature. I have no preferred pronoun. Starting my speech in 3, my bad. In 3, 2, 1. The problem with OO is that the alternative that they told you is not a substitute, it's a complementary, right? Because when we talk about TikTok versus all the other music streaming platform that is only exclusive to music, things like Spotify, Apple Music, and whatsoever, they are totally 2 different products, right? How does it differ? First, integration, for example, just like what that, right? In TikTok, you get 10 seconds. In Spotify, you get the whole music. So it's not TikTok is not gonna replace Spotify. TikTok is an introduction for people to opt into Spotify, right? So therefore, if you want more listener on your side, this is exactly the most cheapest form of advertising that you can get in order to acquire your market. Because if before you want 1,000 people to listen to your music, you need to put your face on a billboard. Your dad needs to know someone from Juilliard and therefore launch you as a big artist. That's why the issue of nepotism baby arts become an extremely elitist platform that Woody has clearly explained to you on his speech has never been responded by OO at all. What the word that opposition has to define is a world where advertisement and the cost of penetrating the market and introducing yourself, putting your art out there is going to be extremely high, right? Because then you are not going to get this free TikTok platform, free TikTok advertisement that clearly grabs people's attention. And in Terra's world, you're going to see like you are going to see this music multiple times, so it's going to stick into people's head. You are much more likely going to get a certain audience that is going to like the kind of arts that you're creating. So on our side, you get that. But second, how does it differ from the usual streaming platform, like the audience, right? Exactly, because TikTok is free, everyone can opt into that. You just need to sign in, you just need to enter your registration and stuff. But when it comes to Spotify, Apple Music, those kind of things you have to pay a subscription fee in order to enjoy all of those things. So even if you want to go to their side, the certain harm is that first, with the same amount of capital, you are not going to get the same market reach, right? you're going to get a much smaller market reach, because in the end, the people who have Spotify, the amount of people who have Spotify and Apple Music is going to be significantly smaller than the amount of people who get TikTok. So what does it mean? It means that in exchange of opening debate, it's clear that we have won by a comfortable margin, right? Because at least on our side, you get this certainty of engagement, you get this certainty of exposure. And by the way, there is no explanation at all why then if you stick to a music-only platform, you are going to definitely get the return, you are going to certainly get the ROI, right? Which is something that is very important in this debate. So first thing that I want to talk about is the material benefit, right? Tere doesn't like TikTok because in the end, you have the exposure without giving you the material benefit. First of all, I think, right, this is not mutually exclusive, right? Exactly, TikTok increase your curiosity towards certain music, and therefore you want to listen to the full amount in Spotify. So what does it tell you? It means that even by curiosity in itself, because these are the songs that are most likely stuck in your head, right? Things like Ocho dibanding-banding ke. I don't usually like dangdut, but like I've been singing that for like the past few days, and I eventually listen to that in my Spotify, for example. So much more likely the curiosity, the hyperfixation that people get from, like what Tere said, seeing the same remix of video is going to lead into money towards these people. They are going to stream on YouTube and whatsoever. But second, even if it doesn't lead to people listening to your music, notice that once you become a TikTok phenomenon, like that guy who sing "Maybe My Soulmate Died" and that guy who sing like "Sorry to Your Next Ex," you get fan engagement, right? What does it tell you? It tells you that it means you are going to have higher leverage when you want to endorse products on your Instagram, for example, because the basis that people use, the red card that they are going to use, is on the basis of engagement. So even if people don't actually buy your products, buy your music on Spotify and Apple Music, you gain that influencer capital. And for that reason, I think TikTok is the most accessible way for us, for artists, to eventually penetrate into the music industry. So like, it's definitely counterintuitive to say that exposure doesn't lead to money. Exposure definitely leads to money. The number of engagement that you get is a capital for you to negotiate with brands and stuff. But even if on their side, the counterfactual is that, oh, if you stick with only the traditional music streaming platforms, Spotify, going on tour, knowing big production house, you are going to get much more money. Notice first the quantity, the amount of people that can access that are extremely little, right? Zudi has told to you about the pipeline of 1D, right? 1D first go to BTR, and then 1D eventually promote 5 songs. But one artist can only carry like one big artist can only carry another big artist. Like, it's unlikely that you have 10 opening acts. But on TikTok, exactly, people scroll for hours on TikTok. There is no limit to how many people can enter TikTok. So that's the reason why on our side, much more people can enter this. Why then this is extremely important. So art doesn't become elitist. You don't need to go to Juilliard in order for you to make a living out of art. People get money, people can eat on our side, and that's a benefit that we're more than happy to defend. Sean, CO.
Is exposure the only thing that music industry wants, and why does engagement in Instagram will ever matter for the music industry as a whole?
The fact that you create arts, I think you want other people to enjoy it. So yeah, exposure is one of the most important things you want to get as an artist. But lastly, what does it replace then? If it doesn't replace Spotify, if it doesn't replace album purchase and whatsoever, it replaces the very thing that is making the music industry exploitative, right? Networking and capital. Right now, you don't have to be a nepotism baby for people to enjoy your music. This is the reason why Leah Kate can get popularity. The girl that sings "What a Shame, Baby, What a Shame" can have popularity even when they are not the son of someone popular and whatsoever. And they don't need to create extremely niche persona in order for them to do so. But lastly, right? Even if people like in the end have to like art have to be somewhat uniform, there is somewhat a formula towards this. Notice that it's not like on their side, there is no standardization at all, right? When you go to production house, you are going to tailor your persona to a certain extent. So it's going to be a wash on both sides. The most important thing that you should do to weigh this debate is which one gives a more certain ROI, which one allows more people to contribute in art, so then it doesn't become extremely exploitative. Because because when you only have small amount of artists, the demand for them to perform is going to be really high. They need to like show up in 20 concerts whatsoever. That's the word that we want to abolish. Never been prouder to propose.
Okay, thank you very much for your speech. To close the debate in opening half, please welcome the leader opposition.
Assalamualaikum, am I audible and visible?
Yes.
If you want to be alive, please do it by chat. I'm gonna start from closing. I'm gonna start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Two issues in my speech. Firstly, artistic expression. Secondly, accessibility. Firstly, let's talk about artistic expression. Zudi's choice argument can only exist when the option exists, right? But we analyze to you that the TikTok influence means that it shifts people from the traditional trend making process such as Spotify, SoundCloud, Billboard, to like TikTok, right? Rather than okay. And even Spotify is trying to adjust TikTok trends due to the significance of TikTok. This is why Spotify have like top 100 TikTok playlists, for example. And this is why the traditional mechanism option that Zudi trying to bring is not valid, because it became shifted due to the existence of TikTok in itself. But okay, let's question. We believe that exactly the existing art trend is evil because of two structural reasons. The first one is on the principle level. We believe that the trend and preference that people have right now is not their own preference, but rather manipulated by the clustering algorithm that exists, right? Exactly. Listen to Mbak Lia. These people are exposed to the same song "Si Kok Bagi Dua" and like over and over again, and like due to the bullshit clustering algorithm, it makes people forced to like "Si Kok Bagi Dua" or "Ojo Dibanding-banding Ke," for example. This is why the algorithm does not necessarily cater to your taste, but manipulate you into a certain taste that is preferable by TikTok. But even if you want to talk about like accessibility and so on and so organic, right? But rather companies who are paying TikTok some amount of money, you cannot buy the principle analysis as to why the artistic expression will be limited for the viewer and the artist. You can always buy the practical level, right? We told you that it will be the genre that people will be creating will be very limited, right? The choice does not exist because label will force artists to make a specific genre like the danceable pop songs in order for you to cater to TikTok. This analysis is important because the importance of TikTok means that people are catering to that standard, for example, and therefore limit their artistic expression. This reduces the variety of genre. Therefore, people who do not get catered by the pop music cannot get catered due to the rise of TikTok trends, for example. Judge, how do you weigh this? Pop genre or the catchy song that Mbak Lia and Zuzu actually analyze is not the most important actor, because if it is so good and touching so many people's mind, you can get the trend anyway in other platform, right? Notice that it touches many individuals. Therefore, mainstream is not the most vulnerable individuals, but the most vulnerable are the indie artists who are being forced to make a specific genre song, or vulnerable artists who can only rely on a specific producer, for example, or a one-hit top TikTok artists who are forced to make that specific genre who got viral, for example, and therefore it limits their agency, and therefore the choice does not exist in government side of the house. CG should.
Yeah. Your example regarding top 100 music of TikTok and Spotify literally shoot you in the leg, because that show people don't listen music in TikTok, listen music from TikTok in Spotify.
Yeah, that's my second issue. Second issue, let's talk about accessibility. We question the comparative accessibility in the government side of the house, because government trying to say about big label and so on and so forth. We believe that the big label ability to advertise due to the resources and experience is symmetrical in both sides of the house, even with the existence of TikTok. How does this look like? It looks like JKT48, who do Fortune Cookies hashtag partnership, or Berani Bersuara, who literally pay influencers to dance to your song, for example. This is symmetrical to paying Billboard or paying like to put your song in the front page of the Spotify, for example. Therefore, and therefore we believe that the like big label do have the advantage in both sides of the house. But what is like the and secondly, we believe that the existing mechanism also already allows the small individual artists to, like, for example, get exposure, right? For example, we have explore mechanism like new songs, indie, etc. playlist, or like new songs appearing after your playlist run out, for example. But thirdly, we analyze to you that TikTok makes people have a little attention span. How does that look like? Listen to opening government, right? The way it works is you are playing one same song over and over again. Therefore, the only viral song that can happen in a limited time span is only like one or two songs, for example. Compare that the moment the dictator is Spotify or YouTube, for example, that encourage you to listen to different song with the autoplay system, for example, or for example, like trending album forces you to listen to different song or understand the artist to the fullest, and therefore we believe that accessibility exists in our side of the house because more songs are able to be viral. Therefore, even with that matrix, we win. But secondly, accessibility is not an inherent virtue because accessibility does not give you money. There are three analyses as to why monetization exists better in our side of the house. One, monetization do not exist in TikTok, right? Therefore, if we force people to like dictate music based on Spotify or YouTube, they get money better. In their side, there is no urgency to do that because in the vast majority of instances, people will be self-sufficed by the existing TikTok 10 seconds, for example. Secondly, these people will be easily manipulated by the record label. How does that look like? It looks like when you feel like you are trending but do not get monetization due to the TikTok mechanism, this is when label can come up to you and make manipulative treatment, for example, because these are the people with no choice. But thirdly, even if we get less followers, we believe that our following is better because it will be more sustainable. Why? Because the way music platform is designed is like, for example, to cater to the artist as a whole and the sustainability of it. That it shows the full song of it, the full album of it, and so on and so forth. This is why but rather TikTok only shows like 10 seconds of one specific song. That's why albeit JKT48 rise in TikTok, but only Rhapsody and Fortune Cookies got like rising listener, for example, due to the way TikTok glorify only a specific song. The comparative in our side of the house is the ability for you the ability and understanding the full the artist and the albums makes people more loyal to the fans. Therefore, even if the number of our fans is fairly limited and comparatively lower, but at least the amount of monetization per consumer is much more in our side of the house. So even if we do trade off the number of people, the loyalty and monetization exists better in our side of the house.
Okay, thank you very much for your speech. To open the debate in closing half, please welcome government member.
Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Sorry, gotta turn on the light. Ooh, last round, guys. POI should unmuting yourself. I'll be taking one from OO. Yeah. Or CO, you know. Depends on the mood. Okay. Speech start in 3, 2, 1. My favorite Jamet Baskara Putra said that once music is out, it becomes democratizes, it becomes public goods. And I think TikTok magnifies that. TikTok democratizes the ability of expression that music provides and democratizes individual ability to express these things through audio-visual medium. Three pieces of framing before I move on to my speech. Firstly, this debate talks about music industry and their interests. OG benefit exists in a vacuum and not tethered to what music industry wants, because that's what the motion entails. Then we're going to quantify what generally music industry deem as good. This is how you suggest the debate. There are three general good things that is seen as in the music industry. Firstly, relatability and art. the importance of expression and connecting with fans. Secondly, artists' livelihood due to the power that studio has over them and the power dynamic that exists. Thirdly, accessibility. Objectively, artists want their message to spread out easier and gain better through fans and etc. Secondly, what is specific about TikTok? Because I think a lot of opening government argument can exist in any social media with and without TikTok. There are 4 specific characteristics that TikTok has. A, we agree that TikTok songs are algorithmic based. Songs that are put into snippets, bits heavy, that are repetitive, and etc. We would argue why this is good on our first argument. Secondly, TikTok is not made for you to watch entertainment based like YouTube, but rather for you to tell your own story and experience through feeds like Instagram. So note that social media does not exist in one single vacuum. There are varieties that exist in it, and TikTok leans towards Instagram because it's easier to create videos through easy editing tools that they provide. And secondly, the fact that they proliferate short video that doesn't require effort like YouTube Central. So note that a lot of it is based on expression. Thirdly, TikTok are very lenient about copyright strike. What this means is that people can use these songs in their reel, as simple as that, as opposed to YouTube, where most of them you will get copyright strike. Lastly, TikTok doesn't work on cross-genre. This is a wrong characteristic on OG, because this is mostly done in derogatory term. Like you heard dangdut like Jamet Kudasai to mock them as opposed to actually enjoy them. It focuses on the genre that you already like and you can have for you have to have more interest to interact. A little bit about OG here. Firstly, OG never really engaged with the worst case with the quality dips. We can see it that dip in creativity and quality exists on site government. We would consider this and explain why this is good and put this from opening opposition. Secondly, we never really talk about what TikTok brings specifically. I could argue that most of their argument focus on social media. Again, we're going to talk about what's specific about TikTok, and CO could flip arguments about OG's argument about small artists to rise, simply saying like music industry can also monopolize the standard that's created by TikTok. Like it's also easier for you to create oligopoly in the music industry once you know the algorithm, how the algorithm works, and etc. So there you go, CO. Rebuttal for you. Argument is going to say, yeah, most likely smaller artists like won't change that much on our side. That's not what we're going to focus about. What we're going to focus on is 2 things: how we increase big artists' quality of life, because most likely these are the individuals going to get all of this priority, and secondly, how this democratizes individual expression to audio-visual experience. All of OOR rebuttal will be integrated, except for one little thing about little attention span. Very sorry OO for having ADHD. First argument: how do we increase artist quality of life? The thesis for this argument is that on-site opposition counterfactual without music, TikTok, music industry artists are continuously forced to innovate and create. This is something that they agree to be an absolute good. This looks like K-pop artists who have to release 3 albums a year. You might not, you make things like a good thing. I fucking hate it when my artist enters a weird punk rock era that a lot of pop artists go through. So this is not what the fans want. Secondly, it's tiring for the artists as well. This happens a lot to artists who constantly have to reinvent themselves and do something that's out of their comfort because the studio forced them to do so, because the only way for you to break through is through constantly reinventing yourself and constantly creating new songs with different beats. Thirdly, expectation from fans to constantly innovate changes and create new things. I think TikTok does good because it lowers the expectation of fans, increasing the from these artists. Fourthly, the return of investment is also hard if you only focus on self, for example, like album streaming and etc. We don't get a lot of money from Spotify, by the way, opening opposition. It's also hard for artists to know what people want and continuously have to guess. On our side, we have quantifiable metrics to the algorithm, through the beats that is in trending and etc. Right? Says this is exposure is good because you can build cult of personality. This would lead to more specific brand deals to these artists that are specific to them and not controlled by the studio, where most of the money will go to the studio as opposed to the artists. So we enable artists' ability to proliferate their rights specifically on site closing government, rather than Spotify doesn't give shit about you and give the money towards the studio first, right? Lastly, how do you weigh
Closing.
this argument, right? All right, what do we prefer then? Before that, right? We are okay with songs being repetitive because it's easier for artists to meet the demand and be famous. It's easier to quantify what people want without constantly create changes. OO might say this is bad because quality decreases. The response, firstly, what's quality? Some guys with expensive shoes says that the toilet in white room as art. I don't think it's art. So it's a specific mood or type of music that they're experiencing their story entails. Lastly, you connect with it. The reason why the screen paintings is deemed to be good art as opposed to my drawing, which is just a scribble, because you have an art moment where you connect with it, the emotion that exists in it. I'm going to explain to them how we connect even better. Yes, close it.
Your contribution of big artists, nice OG, but also we question why big artists are important if they can survive with or without TikTok anyway. That's largely unimportant a bit in your side.
Yeah, just because big artists have money doesn't mean that abuse happens on their side. Lastly, you rebut their argument about smaller artists. I'm catering to big artists here. I'm kind of doing what you want here. So how then you should read this argument? A, vulnerability, because a lot of individuals are more vulnerable like these big artists. Secondly, comparatively, cult of personality is more reliable than O counterfactual. Thirdly, we can see the deep inequality and repetitiveness that OG never did, but we flip this to be a good thing because artists can quantify what the fans like and get better ROI and also have a better quality of life. Second argument about democratizing individual expression to audio-visual experience. No one says you only enjoy the video. We say you interact with the video. There are reasons music video probably has more streams than song on Spotify because the story that entails within it. And why do you increase it on site closing government? Why is it that increasing TikTok individual expression through audio-visual journey is good? 3 reasons. Because you can craft your own story in a relatively simple manner through the tools that TikTok provide, expressing yourself through the song that you love and stories and videos that you have, increasing the chance of art moment where you can connect with those art better. But TikTok can also draw interpretation of those audio-visual video with their own experiences. Secondly, on site opposition, there's no urgency for music industry to nuance their story to individual stories like this. Studios who constantly create songs about rapper who use drugs or hookers, etc., as opposed to explaining about the ground the stories of their life. Once studio understands that they need to create songs that are going to be put in reels, they're going to democratize the stories that exist in the songs. And then lastly, the interactions not only in creating fits because it's easy to create content. There are discussion and music meaning and stories behind it. The impact is this: you increase the relatability and expression through music that are only accessible through TikTok easy tools, as opposed to their side. We have to go through a lot of process such as YouTube and etc. You have more art moment when you can connect with those art, democratizing those particular expression. Proud to propose.
Okay, thank you very much for your speech. To engage with the case, please welcome opposition member.
Wait, our chat for impeachment. Okay. Right. Starting in 3, 2, 1. The music industry is a heterogeneous community. All 3 other benches discuss on what only one branch of the industry wants, because OG wants accessibility for smaller artists, Nike by CG by saying that big artists are important. OO talked about, like smaller artists, like indie artists, for example. These are different actors, and insofar as no team actually explains why they are the most important vulnerable actor to discuss here, then that's a massive deadlock. CO will incorporate the only similarity that every single individual in the music industry have: privatization and long-term benefit. 3 extensions and closing opposition. Firstly, I'm going to talk about framing, largely depicting why the majority of the debate has been uncompetitive at best. Secondly, I'm going to talk about why music industry wants to be a priority. Lastly, I'm going to talk about long-term benefit, right? On framing, 4 points here. First, I think new musicians on their opening debate is largely competitive, right? The reason why my TOI to OG was super important is because I told you that externalities exist. And insofar as people exist in a spectrum who one side loves TikTokers and the other despises them with all their heart, and insofar as some people enjoy a particular genre and some don't, we think all the opening debate is deeply contingent on externalities, right? We agree that OO had the best positive case in the world when they argue about royalty, but unfortunately there has been no link to why music industry will want it to begin with, or would be benefited largely from this. CO will incorporate what music industry actually was. Secondly, on exploitation, right? We argue that exploitation is uncompetitive. One, I think the oligopoly of music corporations is not that huge in status quo. Many recording industries are thriving, so competition do exist. If one company like generally oppress a particular actor, then alternatives do exist, right? But even if you don't buy that, we posit that exploitation is equally as bad. Because even if you're not going to be exploited by oligopolies in GUP, you will be exploited by your viewers who would demand for more and more contents, otherwise they leave you, and you will be exploited internally because you feel this pressure to be responsible to your particular viewers, for example, to continuously create creative content that does not necessarily represent your identity as a particular artist. Three, accessibility is also uncomparative, right? Artists can operate under different platforms, so I think operate on a similar, if not equal, form of algorithm, who I think Spotify and YouTube also shuffle music based on preferences as well. So I think that largely renders the entire opening debate talking about accessibility, for example, on why indie artists will thrive in one platform or another, uncomparative. But lastly, just on CG on big and prominent artists, right? This is really also uncomparative. Like, let's just take out CG biggest part. Big and prominent artists probably don't use TikTok, right? They can perform on stage. Why would they want to perform in front of a video? If they do this, then this nice OG. I think government really needs to take a stance. But even if you consider that to be competitive, I really don't think that's important because they will survive with or without TikTok influence anyway. I think what happens then is that smaller artists, which probably consist of the majority of music industry, would be disproportionately impacted since they don't have the clout, since they don't have the capital to be promoted, since they also don't have a large PR team, for example, to gather like specific trends that are currently rising and what people actually do like from a certain TikTok video. So presumably that means that the majority of music industry falls under closing government. They, I don't know, like intentionally conceded to that. Substantive extension. Let's talk about a priority. I think the certain harm here is that music will be less of a priority. Like, sure, Tere discussed about how people watch TikTok to watch the video and not listen to the music. I'm going to explain why this is exactly bad, right? Because music under GOV will only be seen as a secondary quality, for example. They're only going to be seen as a supporting quality and supporting value instead of the primary source for entertainment. And insofar as people do watch TikTok and people only render the existence of music as, supporting towards the quality of the particular video, supporting towards, the trendingness, I don't know the word, for example, on that particular video, right? Like insofar as people do treat TikTok videos, TikTok contents as something like that, presumably that means that music will be less of a priority, and that's probably bad for the music industry as a whole, regardless of whether you are a big musician like Ariana Grande, for example, who creates a lot of particular music used for TikTok, or like smaller artists, like trying to build their way, like presumably that still means that you don't want to be secondary towards the people who dance or whatever. But also secondly, this is really bad because people associate your songs with TikTok, right? Every time they hear a particular audio, they say that, oh, this is a TikTok audio instead of not knowing the title, not knowing your name. This is something bad because insofar as your identity is reliant on this big social media company, you will never be able to make a name for yourself. And I just need to point out this assumption for GOV, presumes that TikTok is like a really good company while they shame on the other oligopolistic company. Like, if it's true that TikTok is probably that powerful, it means that companies will TikTok will probably be more monopolistic and more exploitative compared to the other oligopolistic recording or music industries who probably have competition with one another. So we really don't understand why the assumption that TikTok is something good or debate. But even if you don't buy that, I think associating or like you think that you have spent the majority of your time with trying to write and trying to harmonize, for example, they associate that under the name of a big social media company, which otherwise does nothing but provide you a platform to, record your particular voice and record your particular movement. We think that that is something bad. I'm going to talk about long-term benefit. After this, I'm going to take opening.
Okay, so your argument is about wanting to have a better music industry. Who are you to arbitrarily set a definition of good music?
We know, but so is everyone in this particular room, this particular debate chamber. But I think what CO does uniquely from the three other things that we characterize the similarity between every single entity of music industry. Like, if you participate in the music industry, then presumably you want your music to be the priority instead of like a secondary value of every like another form of entertainment like dancing or video clips or whatever. I think this is unique because the other three benches discuss about like specific actors or specific branches in music industry, which like I explained in my opening, I'm not going to repeat that. The last thing I want to talk about is long-term benefit. TikTok operates based on trend, and I think this is much more like much more prominent compared to other social media or other like streaming platforms. The trend means that music does not only need to compete with music. This is really important to compete with other forms of video entertainment. We're talking about video clips, we're talking about dancing, we're talking about other theater forms, whatever, right? This is bad because insofar as trends do change and insofar as trends are never sustainable, people can dispose your content necessarily at any time, but they don't necessarily think that your content is particularly like trending anymore. But more importantly, on the idea of competition I discussed before, it's comparatively better because at least in our side of the house, the one who is going to win is the music that appeals the most to the majority, which we think is justified because music is a form of entertainment anyway. But I think the comparative undergo is that music has to compete with these other, entertainers from other different sectors, for example, or just even amateur video makers, like compiling videos of like interviews and whatever. We probably think that this is probably something that is really bad insofar as you need to compete with, other industries. You don't know how necessarily they consider dramatic. For example, you don't know when trends will probably change. At least it's marginally better in our side of the house for music industry. We're so proud of it.
Thank you very much for your speech. To close the debate in government side, please welcome government with
Check is this
yeah, you're audible.
right. Of your question, Jerry of the audience. I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. To point of clarification to take both opposition bench. Firstly, this debate is about celebration. All argument about Spotify marketing, YouTube marketing still exists regardless. This is already set up, which opposition then choose to neglect, and which means that all case about marketing to Spotify is good, royalty fee and those kind of things will still exist regardless. The question then, why people eventually want to opt in from the softwares that eventually listen to Spotify? I think both opposition bands lose on that platform, and sustainability of artists eventually go. Secondly, CR really loses the debate with the moment they argue music seen as a secondary in compared to other type of art, for example. Number one, it is unrealistic. Pretty sure everyone here still listen to the music, probably Zudi when Zudi work out, but obviously me when I work out. Secondly, even if it's true, we don't really understand what is harm then, because when music being seen as secondary, like only an additional thing towards something like maybe movie or a certain story, the artist will eventually get the marketing, for instance, still get the value added from the movie created, for instance. We don't really understand what's the harm then, even if people, seeing this as something that's secondary in this particular regard, because they still have royalty fee coming from the movie created. But let's talk about the first thing that I want to talk about in terms of trend. Sadly, all claim that trend is bad because it changed over time. However, the way music first being consumed is a trend need to be accessed. Question that exists, even if at the worst case it's only like 1 week, it's still a benefit for people to actually know first and eventually listen to their content. What is the structural reason that we eventually have in terms of why TikTok is a very unique platform where people eventually want to opt in and listen to Spotify or those kind of royalty platforms that all want to. Firstly, algorithm in Spotify sadly work on the basis of similarity of song that you listen. Take a look on your phone. You are allowed to do that, by the way, and see workout recommendation playlists. Mine is all Japan whip song. That is to say, it is true that you will get new music, but it is only within the same genre. But failure in terms of exploration of other type of genre of music, for example, where it literally doesn't really broaden the ability for individuals to eventually listen to a different type of music. How then this change with TikTok algorithm? TikTok is unique on the level of content-based algorithm rather than music genre-based creation. David that worked in ByteDance, by the way, told me that the content are sorted based on content genre, e.g., POV, tarot, heartbreak, for example, and etc. That's to say, the algorithm uniquely serve diverse music based on the content made rather than music within the same genre, for example, in this particular regard. This is why when you export to Kanashini or Yasashishani, for example, you are also exposed with Maroon 5, for instance, because these both songs are eventually portray heartbreaking content in TikTok, which is two different genres within the same content. What you like it to happen is that individuals are better in terms of having the ability to eventually serve and eventually explore diverse set of music and listen to the rap first, because listening to the rap is the way to eventually you to enjoy and eventually get the sustainability that you like the music or not. Because if you don't like the rap, you literally will not like the whole music, for instance. Rap is literally the marketing point. Bobby extension regarding democratization, eventually the tipping point, eventually take the deadlock in the opening bench, whether or not this individual is eventually will listen to Spotify or buy the album. Why is that so? Firstly, audiovisual content provide a specific story that might entail on attention and correlate to you better. And this is to say in terms of relatability. Current problem is true what OO said, that there's a limited amount of time spent by individual, for example, limited attention span, like maybe Bobby ADHD or even Jane, for example, in this particular case. And that's happened naturally, not specifically from TikTok, but because of the rise of social media in general. This is why people start forgetting and skipping the lyrics, for example. You don't know what the lyrics mean and what the story want to give and behind the artist, for example, so on and so forth. This is why you take for granted when you listen to the music, for example, and you don't really invest in the music. music. How then did this change in our setup house? The idea of algorithm give you the nuance that this music eventually being entails and correlated to a certain story that is related to you. This is why I can listen to eventually every single like somebody to love coming from Queen, for example, and remember my heartbreak when I'm in the high school, for example, because I correlate the music with the story that is in nostalgia to me, for instance, so on and so on. And this is what being utilized by TikTok to eventually goes to individual and say that this music is correlated with your individual identity, for example. This is when individual want to opt in to listen more to the song, want to opt into the artist, and want to opt into eventually buying the music because the infestation of emotion that they eventually have. This rationale of emotion become the tipping point of individual want to enter the music and want to craft this, for example, with their own passion. But secondly, we also win in terms of consumer basis and how we eventually give them democratization of content. The reason why then this is important because it's a principle of liberation of art, where art shouldn't be only a one-way communication where artists eventually want to give you a certain story, but also your way to eventually have a certain way to eventually say that this music should be the identity, should be my I identity, for example, or we identity, because we cannot control the artist, but we as the consumer should have the ability to eventually dictate what kind of music that they want as their identity, for example, in comparative to opposition side of the house that need to be the artist that eventually told them first. What is the conclusion of this point? It is true that marketing might exist in both sides, but specific TikTok marketing are the one that enters individuals to eventually opt into the music that is diverse and being marketed like si kok bagi dua, for example, even if it is kocak, even if it is stupid, but individual invest on it because they remember nostalgia in their high school that they spent with their teacher. But thirdly, even if it is true that the exclusive, listening, for example, are only accessed in Spotify, like in their side of the house, we think that it is surely never eventually being, the tipping point. Why is it so? Because Spotify and YouTube Music money scheme is eventually a very small amount of income for this kind of individual artist. What does it look like? Ariana Grande literally got millions of views, but the amount of money that they got eventually very small. This is due to the scheme of very low amount of subscription payment and also the division of money eventually being given upward a large amount of artists in this particular regard. Look at Spotify, 15,000 rupiah. How the hell do you think it is a huge amount of money for Ariana Grande or even other type of genre music, for example? That is to say, it's only a way for them to eventually market their music, not the own platform. The way they have it is by using concert, for example, and this kind of thing, in which we got in our setup. Why is that so? Because Bobby explanation regarding explanation regarding repetitiveness, and even if it is a repetitiveness and algorithm, for example, it gives the nuance that artists eventually have more ability to eventually see what society eventually like, for example, give them not pressuring condition where they need to eventually rethink what the society want, trial and error, for example, that is also inherently very expensive for them to eventually try, because creating one album is not inherently very cheap. Literally, Queen, Freddie Mercury sold their fan to create their own first album because of their inability to eventually get a certain budget. This is why a lot of artists at the very beginning goes to loan shark or goes into a debt trap from the producer, for example, hence invested in a very bad contract. In our side of the house, we give you ability to eventually see what society wants, and this is the leeway for you to eventually make a music that can be popular in a short term, in a fast way, for example, and not sacrificing your own ability or your own money. Hence, in this particular regard, we win in terms of protection toward artists in the music industry, especially the smaller one that have no ability, for example, to eventually trial and error. We also win in terms of consumer basis and also sustainability of artists. Because of the reason, the government obviously.
Thank you very much for your speech. To close the entire debate, please welcome Pearson Specter.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Okay, if anyone wants to POI is to show to the chat, I'm going to be from opening government. Right, I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. First, I'm going to engage to the idea of democratization and audiovisual incentive that comes from CG, and also the incentive for like big artists coming from CG. And then secondly, I'm going to break the deadlock under opening about how algorithm and etc. is better or not better, OG versus OO, and why we actually brought you eventually the long-term benefit as to why this doesn't matter at the end of the day, and what we need to focus on is the long-term benefit if this artist actually gets successful to begin with, and how do we maintain their success, because obviously we need to make a sustainable, for you to make a sustainable career, you cannot just suddenly be replaced by other trends, for example. example, that will exactly happen under opening government and closing government side. First, let's talk about CG, right? The main idea is about this democratization of music and how you actually have this like audio visual link, and you can also have nostalgia going to the certain music that you view in TikTok, for example, right? Number one, I don't think that this is exclusive to the point in which if you like see a song in TikTok or you see a song in Spotify, for example, what is the exclusive difference in TikTok? Like if you hear that song, for example, it's entertainment, you can probably also like attribute certain particular feelings or certain particular memories if you hear the song in any kind of media whatsoever is entertainment. I do not see why you have to like see someone dancing in TikTok, for example, in order for you to attribute a certain memory to another person, for example, or to another past like event, for example, is right? I do not get why that particular happens to begin with. Secondly, they're talking to you about how currently TikTok and etc. It's something that is a short-term benefit, for example. That then we need something to actually hook people first. If not, then they will actually go to launcher and etc. For example, is right? I do not think that is actually going to happen because notice this in German, and this is something that has never been responded by CZ. By the way, is just negated this in 30 seconds. Basically, what Justin told you is that there is a secondary aspect in regard to the music in TikTok, for example, is right? And it's not only the fact that it's secondary because like music, we tell you that music is secondary. No, we told you that music should be a primary thing, but TikTok makes it secondary, ladies and gentlemen, right? The reason as to why this is the case is because when you view to TikTok, for example, ladies and gentlemen, the star of the show is usually the dancers, for example. The star of the show is usually the people that do not necessarily make the music itself, but exploit out of that music, for example, ladies and gentlemen, right? That is to say that usually when you see a TikTok influencer, for example, ladies and gentlemen, the reason as to why you go to that influencer is not necessarily because he or she makes good music, but he or she actually makes good dances based on certain musical genres, for example, ladies and gentlemen. So you go to that particular person, not to the music itself, but for the dancers or whatever itself, ladies and gentlemen, or the other content creator that utilizes that music. But he says that but you still get credited as the music ladies and music like creator, ladies and gentlemen, right? No, that's not the case. Why? Because notice, ladies and gentlemen, because usually either A, this will not credit the people that actually like make this particular music to begin with, because there's no rules enforcing them to do so. But B, the fact that these people are the ones that are actually taking all over the spotlight, for example, and this is the people that actually get the most exposure in TikTok, and these are the people that are actually most talked about in the social media, for example, and because these are the most popular people because TikTok highlights them, meaning that even if the musician gets credited, most likely it's going to be overshadowed by the massive amount of like influence that this TikToker has exploiting of that music to begin with. So in that regard, that's why we actually told you why the music will actually be secondary and why this is bad, because number one, the artist will not actually get any of the short-term benefit that CG and OZ actually wants them to do. But second, it is in principle harmful because you're actually exploiting of another person. So we don't actually crediting them, or this other person so will be a stepping stone for a TikToker, dancers, and etc. They don't necessarily deserve that particular benefit to begin with, because you are actually taking away the work of another person and you're exploiting of that opportunity, for example. This and so that's why number one is important. Music already characterizing what is the interest of this artist to begin with, and most likely what is the harm in regard to actually making it into TikTok and etc. Which is also separate to the fact that other alternative exists, because insofar as there is a big influence of this TikTok, which is necessary for CG and OGKs to run, or at the very least there's one person actually suffering because of this, it's necessarily not important for other alternatives to exist, because this already creates a harm for these individuals, right? Secondly though, why do we think that our extension on long-term benefit is winning, right? The reason for this is because most likely you cannot actually win in regard to the opening debate. You cannot credit them both because both of them has that block, right? Because look, if OG wants to say that algorithm matters, for example, we also don't think this is the case, because the 80% of algorithm, for example, most likely will only cater to the most successful TikToker, for example, because TikTok and etc. obviously wants to spotlight their biggest earners and their biggest rakers of influence and their biggest rakers of fans, for example, because these are the people that actually gives the money for TikTok, for example, right? And also gives them influence. Secondly, though, if this is also true, for example, most likely the personality trend, etc., will also exist under OZ and CG. Why? Because most likely then you are always going to follow the best TikTokers, for example, because these are the people that have been proven to work, same as the music industry and same as the label industry, for example, am I right? But thirdly, they also talk about how this oligopoly, if you go for label industry, right? Insofar as TikTok actually has gaining massive power in the current status quo, they can also create a certain degree of taking away the agency of these artists, because the artists actually have to go to TikTok, for example, in order to become successful. If TikTok is that big of a success platform, for example, meaning that you take away their agency to go to other platforms also in the line. Fourthly, though, you say that there is 20% chance that you can actually get other genders, but it's not absolute, because if you, for example, do not like it, then you're not going to get into it. But most likely the other 20%, for example, do not cater to smaller artists, for example, because most likely even if you treat them to like rock genre that they never listened before, or rap genre, for example, most likely this rap, the people that actually do rap and the people that actually do country music, etc., are most likely going to be highlighted only to the most, again, the important people and the most important, biggest earners corners in that particular genre, for example. Same again in the music industry or other particular platforms. So in that regard, it's completely the same. There's still a certain degree of oligopoly. There's still a certain degree of you mimicking other people. There's also a certain degree of randomness, and sometimes people also do not have any access to the data in and of itself in order to figure out the algorithm, because that's exclusive to the company itself, right? So in that regard, the probability of you actually gaining success is quite unlikely under both sides of the house. So what we need to defend then is that for the small amount of people that actually succeeded in this industry to begin with and get their big break, what platform do we think is that it's better for them to actually sustain that career to begin with? We think it's better for you to go to other platforms and to not go to TikTok or to go through like major label industry, for example. Why is that the case, right? Because number one, Justin already told you an important point. He told you that most likely TikTok, you have to compete with other trends, for example. I know that this has been brought a little by opening opposition, but they never really extended to the point why this is extremely harmful, right? Because most likely then, if you have to compete with other trends, then even if you know the trends and algorithms of the music industry, then you do not know the others of other genres, for example, like sports, like dancing, or whatever genre, whatever else in TikTok. So you do not know how to compete with these particular people, for example. Secondly, though, because then you have actually like massive genres that are available in TikTok, then you're going to be seen as disposable by TikTok, for example, right? That is to say that if you have a lower view count in a particular month, for example, they can just easily sacrifice you to highlight things like sports or like whatever else, for example, is, am I right? So meaning that you are a disposable content in the eyes of TikTok. So your sustainability in career and your short-term like 5 minutes of glory will be gone in an instant compared to other alternatives. Right? If you're succeeding in like Spotify or like traditional label industry, for example, is, am I right? Most likely number one, because there's not much other content other than music, the competition is less likely to be harmful towards you. But secondly, though, like TikTok and Spotify and music industry label, for example, is more sustainable because necessarily they only focus on one particular thing, and you can have a more sustainable industry likely to succeed that way. And because all the reason we break the deadlock in opening, and that is why we win the debate. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for the debate, for everyone. Thank you